risk. And that's really what one doesn't know. So you can get, a series of events happening. But again, yeah, I would say one doesn't know what's in their book, but I think the asset management side of those banks are safe. The investment banking side of it is, anybody's guess. And I think the risk is evaluated at around about 900 billion, which is a giant amount of money. But in this day and age, it's seemingly less concerning. I would definitely be more concerned about the yen and the peg and the effect of the leverage unwind. The real issue is a liquidity crisis. That's what one needs to be on the lookout for. That's what puts everybody over the edge, and that's what spikes, yields further. I mean, look at the 2 year Treasury is offering 4.13%. Now that's higher than what you can get on the stock market. So I think we'll continue to see weakness in the global stock markets, and we'll see continued dollar strength whilst people have deep uncertainty. So waiting for the next trigger, the next real trigger is going to be Ukraine, the yen, and say, unknown unknowns, or maybe even known unknowns like Credit Suisse. That would be my three things I'd be watching.
Thank you for that. All right. So now we go into the tech news right after we hit the air horn. Happy Monday, October 3rd. Welcome to Q4, everybody. This year's going by. So, to kick things off on a typical slow Monday, the Kim Kardashian story, and it's amazing how much coverage this is getting. Kim Kardashian settles with the SEC for $1.26 million after not reporting a $250,000 payment to promote Ethereum Max on Instagram, and won't promote crypto for 3 years henceforth. So she's agreed to pay over $1 million because she didn't report having made $250,000, and now she can't promote cryptos for 3 more years. Okay, I'm okay with that. Next up, sources. The Financial Times says they have sources that Celsius founder withdrew $10 million weeks before the company froze user accounts. A source says $8 million of that was used for taxes. Bloomberg says they have sources that Sony plans to make 2 million PlayStation VR2 headsets by March. An ambitious target, that is, 2 million, yeah. And has not yet faced supply chain constraints. The Vice Society ransomware gang publishes data allegedly from LA Unified School District after the school system did not pay the ransom. Probably because the data wasn't very valuable. What sort of data would you have from a school district exactly? Yeah, I don't think it was worth paying for. Financial Times says TikTok's European business reports nearly $1 billion in revenue last year, up from 172 million the year before, and 900 million lost due to increased spending on its 4,396 staff. So they made $1 billion. They nearly spent all of it on 4,400 new team members. Yeah, that's how you grow. Next is from Citizen Lab, the team out of Toronto who revealed the Pegasus. And they say that Pegasus attacks on Mexican activists and reporters used zero-click exploits. Yeah. But this was after Mexico's president called Pegasus a thing of the past. Okay, next up, Bloomberg is doing a profile piece on Checkout.com's founder, who's now going to be doing investing in fintech startups, ostensibly out of London. And he has a net worth valued at about $11 billion, which is very considerable because I guess he didn't raise a whole lot of, or he self-funded Checkout.com early on, and that gave him a very substantial piece of the company. Normally, founders have, you know, 10% of a company, not 60% like that. So, and then when you get to 40 billion valuation, 60% of 40 billion. Next up from Reuters, a document shows an Italian court scrapped a $200 million fine for Apple and Amazon from 2021 over alleged collusion in selling Apple and Beats products. Okay, Wired says they're doing a look at the fake online traffic business as some ad exchanges look the other way and advertisers are embarrassed to admit they purchased fraudulent inventory. Botmasters have created a Kafka-esque system where companies are paying huge sums to show their ads to bots, and everyone is fine with it, is the article. And next, from Bloomberg, a company called Tally Technologies, which uses AI to automate credit card payments, raises $80 million. UK-based blockchain gaming startup called Improbable, which raised $500 million from SoftBank, is close to raising another $100 million at a $3 billion valuation. University of Illinois, Amazon, Apple, Google, and Facebook and others launched the Speech Accessibility Project, aiming to improve voice recognition for disabled users. That's cool. Deliveroo partners with UK supermarket chain Morrisons to open its first physical store in London. Customers can shop in-store, collect orders, or get local delivery. And a whole bunch of more fundraisings. Iran's 3 main mobile operators shut down service for 8 hours for 10 consecutive days, causing an uptick in landline traffic. They're plugging into their physical lines. Okay. Um, Washington Post says from shutting down services only in Texas to letting users opt out of hateful content, tech companies are gaming out responses to the state's social media law. Instagram food photography is becoming more realistic, driven by generational changes, more diverse food creators, and a frustration with the curation culture. Tencent is no longer China's most valuable company after its shares have fallen 64% since January 2021, wiping out $623 billion in market cap, more than any other company globally. UN World Food Program and the WHO say a nearly 2-year internet and phone shutdown in Ethiopia is hampering aid delivery and health monitoring. Semantic details an ongoing campaign by a hacking group potentially tied to China-backed threat actor that hides malware in Windows logo image. Those are your big boring headlines. That record time. So now we get into the tweets. Did anybody have a tweet since we met on Friday that they want to make sure we jump into?
I posted one today, Tyler.
Okay, what was that?
It was about the gift that keeps on giving, GitHub. The VA getting compromised, the VA's source code compromised from that. Sort of like what happened with Microsoft Exchange.
Okay.
So once the source code's compromised, expect a bunch of exploits coming down the road real soon.
So, Tom, it's Ben here. I'd be interested in So what do you mean the source code was compromised? I'm interested in. So there's a bunch of people out there who have local copies of this repository. So they can roll back and they can see the compromises, right? So
So
what's
the
happened exactly? Yeah, I'm
I think
interested.
he means they're looking inside and seeing what and how it works. Therefore, exploits can be generated. I don't think they're going to necessarily inject. I think that's what you're suggesting.
there's multiple different ways of it. Okay, so one scenario is, all right, if you have GitHub and, for instance, you have your localized copies and maybe you make your commits from that. What'll happen is if they compromise your username, your username and password, they can make commits as you. Okay, and you may not even realize it. Because if you follow a pattern of life, what times are these people normally on? You can put a backdoor in it and backdoors wouldn't be picked up. Now, when you compromise the source code, aka in the case of Microsoft Exchange, where they've downloaded it, once you've localized it, you could scan it for vulnerabilities. In other words, you could take it, set it up in your environment, look for these 0 days that nobody else knows about, and then just trickle them out one at a time. Okay? And this can go on for years. Okay? The other thing that'll happen is when they do patches for those 0 days, they'll do what's called a bin diff. Now, what a bin diff will do, it'll take the executables from before the patch and post the patch, and also look for what new exploits may have been posted, because once you have that source code, you know a lot more.
So
That means
this
that
is not an open source project in the first place, then, Tom. This is something that wasn't intended to be open source. Is that what you're saying?
No, what happens is GitHub, since Microsoft bought GitHub, it's gained massive traction. Okay, and what has also happened is they'll sell you on things like GitHub Advanced Security. Okay, if you do the timeline analysis of when GitHub Advanced Security came out, it literally came out in the same time a bunch of breaches started. So this is my theory. Maybe GitHub was compromised, and people, there's probably a couple of backdoors inside of GitHub that nobody knows about. That's a theory. The other possible, route is people don't know how to secure it. Okay, because I've been asked to do a couple of GitHub audits. How do you secure it? Well, if you secure it from your GitHub enterprise, and you know how to secure it for that particular instance, how do you ensure the developers also do that with all their own other repos?
okay, I just
It's a,
retweeted.
it's a pain in the butt, I'll tell you that.
Okay, so I found a couple of interesting tweets here. Um, the first one is from Evan from CNBC. It says how John Deere plans to build a world of fully autonomous farming by 2030. John Deere tractors are going autonomous. On the green and yellow tractor company has been pushing further into tech and robotics for the farm.
Now, if only they would allow open source modification of their software, then we'd have an awesome situation. But I don't think most farmers like that aspect of how they roll.
Tomoko found one on Nicholas's point from Reuters. It says Japan's finance minister says Japan is ready to take decisive steps on yen. Disagreement between the central bank and the government in Japan. No policies will be changed for 2 to 3 years by the head of Bank of Japan. According to him, even he will leave soon. Oh, even if he leaves soon. Okay. And radical Bitcoin and Ethereum rival that is being backed now by Google billionaire Eric Schmidt is backing a new radical Bitcoin and Ethereum rival. So they're trying to make a new layer one. He says it scales better. It's better technology. Is it called Chainlink? Is that the name of it? I think it is.
Chainlink is an Oracle service, and we've discussed this before. If it has a VC backer, or a backer like Eric Schmidt, it's not going to be decentralized or distributed, and Chainlink is just an Oracle service. So he's
But
trying
he
to find
does know how to
he's trying
scale,
to
though.
find relevance. He
Well,
does know how
Eric
to
does know how
scale,
to.
but scaling privately is different than scaling publicly.
Moving along, gosh, Poppy found a whole bunch of autonomous vehicle headlines. DHL, the global delivery company, has begun testing an autonomous delivery vehicle built by Estonian company called Cleveron. The trials will take place in Estonia and use um, its own electric delivery robot, which has 100-kilometer range. That's cool. And autonomous truck maker Einride from Stockholm launches now in Germany. Future of transport is electric, autonomous, and digital. And congrats to the Einride team.
Has anyone been talking about the fact that during this energy crisis, reliance on electric vehicles has become extremely difficult?
Yeah. And Peter Zeihan's already warning that the mad rush kind of to ban combustion engines, that we're not really ready for it on a supply chain basis, um, to manufacture, because there's still some Chinese dependencies and Russian dependencies on even building batteries at scale, lithium batteries.
It's just transferring, reliance onto rare earths and lithium, and it seems that I think I saw that access to the electric generators for these electric vehicles here in France, they were charging something like 90 euros for a top up. So that doesn't really help anyone, I don't think. I mean, it might.
Uh, yeah.
Well, it might not help financially. It does help energetically. The energetic benefits are huge over fossil. 3, 4, 5 to 1 depends on the car. So may not help financially, but it certainly helps from a resource point of view. And it doesn't really transfer the problem straight from fossil to rare earth metals, because when you bring the rare earth metals to the surface, firstly, they're going to last decades before they even need recycling. By then, we'll be able to recycle them 100%, in the same way lead acid batteries are recycled 99-ish%. So then they just churned on the surface. So provided you're using a renewable source, it's not the same at all. Fossil was produced over, as we all know, over millions of years. Once it comes up, it comes up. It's not being reproduced. Bringing rare earth metals as to be used effectively as a catalyst in what is effectively solar power. Most forms of renewable are solar, ultimately, whether it's wind, tide, solar. You're just using those rare earth metals as a catalyst. So, and then they can be recycled once they're at the surface. So once they're up, they're up.
So wait, what's the
And
recycling for lithium?
what is
Because you
it?
said
Not huge at the moment, because they don't need to, because most of the batteries work. But as we start to see them fail, well, I think we can be, as we did with lead acid. We're now at 99+% recyclability of lead acid batteries. I have no reason to think that you're not going to get similar with lithium. And hopefully, we're moving towards better lithiums, like phosphate based, rather than the nickel and cobalt and things. So I'm not sure it's exactly the
But
same.
just in
Think of
terms
it
of,
more as
but
a
in terms
catalyst
of,
rather than an energy source.
I wasn't thinking so much as in the cars. I was thinking more about in the grid, where the base load is still, even with, sorry about that, even with the renewables, I think it's like 22% of the supply, because there's still massive reliance on coal, gas, oil, etc. But it doesn't seem to be, it seems to be testing the theory. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I'm reading a really good book. It's called withouthot.com, Sustainable Energy Without the Hot Air. It goes through the numbers properly by a Cambridge scientist, David McKay, who's unfortunately dead. The bottom line, I think, is for the UK at least, if we reduce our consumption just a little, 10% or something, and we push like hell on the renewables, we can do it. But it is a difficult balance. And ultimately, if we keep increasing our consumption at the rate we are, regardless of anything to do with anything else, Stephen Hawking worked out the surface of the planet will glow red hot in 500 years. That is just the waste heat from our activity. If we continue to increase energy use as we are, so we can have an energy use that's what it'll be in 500 years' time if we keep going that way. But we need to be multi-planetary to do that. That's nothing to do with global warming, by the way. This is nothing to do with carbon dioxide. This is just the waste heat because it's subject to an
That's funny that
exponential
he thinks
increase.
we'll. It's funny that he thinks we'll be, or he thought we'd be around in 500 years.
Yeah, well,
I
that's
think that's
optimistic,
more
exactly.
unlikely.
Yeah, well, I like to be optimistic, you know. So I think a little bit of a trim of consumption and a massive push on renewables will do it, but it needs to be done sensibly with proper numbers and no greenwashing, no BS. Just go to the first principles, and if you don't have the first principles, let's learn them together, and then calculate upwards from there, and then make moral and other arguments based on numbers that work. And some things work better than you might think. Tide in the UK works pretty well, for instance. So does offshore wind. Geothermal doesn't work very well at all.
Hasn't nuclear become the option of choice given everybody's
Nuclear's cool, yeah.
witnessing?
Nuclear's not. Yeah. Nuclear's great for the moment. It's not a long term. There's not an infinite amount of uranium. But yeah, it's a shame we don't build any new nuclear plants. They take too long to set up. They don't produce enough energy over the lifetime for their cost. But use the existing ones. Please don't shut them down. For God's sake, yeah. They
Depends where
produce.
you.
The UK gets 4 terawatts of nuclear 24/7. Just run it till they're done with. Absolutely.
Well, just have a listen to what the Italian president said about the French president when it comes to nuclear energy and where they source their uranium in some parts of Africa. That's less than, or apparently implied to be less than ethical. So, we move from one challenge to another. Energy's basically, I think it really depends on the region. So the cost of energy is really defined by where you live in the world, and you work up from there with the technologies that you have that scale in complement with that. So I don't know if there's a one size fits all
Exactly.
for the point.
Totally depends on geography. It depends on population. So Iceland has an 80 times lower population density than the UK, and it sits on a geothermal on a tectonic plate boundary. So not surprising, geothermal is a really good choice in Iceland. The energy is much closer to the surface because the Earth is fractured there, and the population density, which is crucial to it, is 80 times lower. So all these things, Eric, matter. Your latitude, the tectonic situation, how much Atlantic. The UK has got waves that have accumulated over the entire Atlantic Ocean. Of course, they've got a lot of accumulated energy by the time they get to us. Not the case for Germany. You ask what their wave energy, wave energy turns out to be crap even in the UK. But at least the fundamental potential's there in the UK. It's not in Germany. It's inland. If you're on the North Pole, solar's not so clever for 6 months of the year, and so forth. So you've got to take a different view for each place from the same first principles. And it doesn't take long to do a back of the envelope and make sure that what we're being sold or suggested makes sense. And often it doesn't, and sometimes it does.
Okay.
Did we get any insight on apart from the just general gossip mongers on Nord Stream 1, 2? Were any experts in the room over the last week offering any insights on the sabotage?
I made an argument for why the U.S. might be involved, like as that news was breaking, like an hour or two, as word of that was circling the globe instantaneously. I put together a few different, seemingly unrelated data points to make a case for why it might be the U.S. Sort of before other people that I don't like to be associated with started doing the same. Because I didn't know, as is usual in America, everything becomes polarized, and there was some pundits on mainstream TV who were also making this argument, but less, I think, less efficiently. But anyway,
But don't
I,
you
I don't.
think
That's
that the Germany and the other EU leaders are too calm even after the thing happened? Meaning to say that they already know that it's coming.
Are you implying you think they knew they were expecting it?
They knew exactly what's happening.
Well, one of the pieces that I brought in my case was that the CIA, it's documented from the New York Times, I believe was the source, that the CIA warned Berlin, was the headline, that the pipelines would be the targets of sabotage back many months ago. It said in the summer. Oh, that in the summer they would be a target, but the warning came quite early into the invasion process. So around the early stages of the invasion process, say February, March, the U.S. told, the CIA told Berlin, that means the German government, that the Nord Stream 1 and 2 pipelines would be targets of kind of retaliation or sabotage. And as everyone's pointing out, how Biden answered a journalist verbally about, if Russia invades, that Nord Stream 2 would be shut down. And the journalist said, how would you do that? And he says, trust me, we have ways of doing that or whatever. And there was a few other really interesting things. Was the shut off or the sabotage, if we can call it that, happened literally hours, like 3, after the new Norwegian to Poland natural gas pipeline turned on. That's kind of interesting. As if it would have been very problematic for our European allies without the concrete knowledge that new pipeline was going to work. Like, what if, for example, that one didn't work? Well, we probably, assuming, let's make a wild, tinfoil hat assumption here, that the U.S. is behind this monkey business. We would want to make sure that the new pipeline is going to work as promised before we went ahead and did that nasty business. And so the fact that this sabotagery happened literally minutes after the new pipeline was put into effect is an interesting coincidence. And by the way, how did the CIA know that those pipelines were going to be targets? And if we did know that, and we can easily monitor that rather limited piece of geography in the Baltic where that would happen. It's not that big. They're not that deep. Every vessel that goes anywhere near those pipelines in the Baltic is very well documented and known. And if there were Russian ships that appeared to be mischievous in that area, we would have been all over that. We would have known that.
Russian autonomous drone submarines, I think that's probably a candidate technology here for that.
Well, we certainly would have some kind of story on the ready about likely scenarios if we really suspected them of this, and we aren't even offering any. And in fact, the opposite's happening. Russia's spy chief, the FSB chief, is claiming they have firm evidence of the U.S. being behind the sabotagery, which they wouldn't necessarily have known that the U.S. was cooking that up, but they might have been, to some degree, trying to monitor for that, and that's why they have that. If in fact they do, I don't actually necessarily believe them, but it's wild. And as others have pointed out, and since I made this case on Friday, something else did happen. Anthony Blinken,
He said it would be strategically helpful.
advantageous. He even confirms that this is to the U.S.'s advantage that this has happened.
Well, it avoids anybody slacking off, so it takes away the decision to forgive the Russians.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean the best Occam's razor analysis on this, in my mind, is Putin would love to have the option to turn those things back on, and he's using them as a hostage. And he's holding this hostage with a gun to its head, and someone else just shot his hostage, which is of no benefit to him. That his hostage is worth very little to him when they're dead.
Exactly.
Exactly, Tyler. There's so many different players incentives, people that could benefit, people who could benefit from the world assuming that somebody else did it, so indirectly like that. The deconvolving all of that is it's difficult without some hard evidence, isn't it? It's really interesting, but it's so difficult to know which of the many possible scenarios are possible. So,
Would make for a great Bond film, though.
oh yeah.
So, BBC's reporting that messages reveal there's more Elon Musk chat messages coming out. Some revealing how Musk and Twitter's new CEO fell out of favor with each other. They say that the tweets or the internal messages that were published in the court filing reveal how the pair's relationship, which after a good start went dramatically south. And this Twitter CEO reaches out saying, "Hey, Elon, great to connect directly. Would love to chat." Elon liked the message, perhaps tonight around 8, he says. So far, so good. And anyway, things started off well and then went south.
What was the thing that made it go south?
Well, this article points to on April 5th. One second. Elon Musk sent a message saying, "I will provide advice which they may or may not choose to follow." On April 5th, Jack Dorsey told Musk that Mr. Agrawal is an incredible engineer, but that Twitter's board is terrible. Ouch. And 2 days later, Mr. Agrawal and Musk are burnishing their coding credentials. I wrote heavy-duty software for 20 years, Mr. Musk says. I interface way better with engineers who are able to do the hardcore programming than with program manager MBA types. Agrawal replies, "In our next convo, treat me like an engineer instead of a CEO, and let's see where we get to." "You got it," Mr. Musk replied. But then disaster struck. On April 9th, Mr. Musk tweets asking why so few of Twitter's most followed accounts tweeted very much. "Is Twitter dying?" he asks. In his tweet, he says most of the top accounts tweet rarely and post very little content, and he's referring to Barack Obama, Justin Bieber, Katy Perry, Rihanna, and the people with the most followings are not actively engaged in tweeting. And this tweet angered Mr. Agrawal. Later that day, he messages, "You are free to tweet, 'Is Twitter dying?' or anything else about Twitter, but it's my responsibility to tell you that it's not helping me make Twitter better in the current context. Next time we speak, I'd like you to provide, that is some kind of grammatical error, obviously, perspective on the level of internal distraction right now and how it's hurting our ability to do work." And then I guess Elon replied back, "What did you get done this week? I'm not joining the board. This is a waste of time. We'll make an offer to take Twitter private."
Ouch! Wow, that seems rather
Seems like a
abrupt of a
rage
turn.
flex. Yeah, that's like a rage flex. First of all, he's telling him he's a better coder than Argowal, and the next thing he's telling him that you're not helping us do good work, and then he says, "Well, if you don't like it, I'll buy you out." That seems like he got spoofed into spending $44 billion. Plus, you note that his stock is down 7% today, so it gets more and more expensive for him every day.
But to be fair, I think the Twitter CEO, was rather cordial and respectful. So I'm not sure why that went so south so quickly, especially given that the culture at Twitter is one of political activism, awareness, I don't know, wokeness. I think the employees themselves would be affected by these kinds of tweets. So some sensitivity would make sense, and I think it's good that the CEO kind of defended his people. So
Agreed. I'm no fan of Musk. I think he's a shit disturber.
Okay. So a few more tweets here. One is from BB, from the BBC. You did it, BB. Can electrical stimulation improve your gym workout? Whole body EMS suits are the new big thing in fitness, but do they work? That electromagnetic stimulation, is that what that is? EMS?
Yes. It says it will make your 20 minutes workout like you work out for 3 or 4 hours. I'm not
I,
sure.
I,
Yeah, I actually used one of these technologies after my cancer surgery. So I had part of my tongue removed. So it's like a miracle that I can speak at all, but only because I used this kind of headset, which had these kind of think like needles or pricky aspects, and they just kind of attach to the top of your head. And the technology is transcranial direct current stimulation, but there's also electromagnetic ones now, and they stimulate your brain by kind of priming your motor cortex, and then you're in a higher energy state with respect to the neural firing, so you get much more neural firing. And this was actually a technology developed for DARPA to help soldiers learn how to become sharpshooters sooner by using less ammunition and having less training time. So it reduces training time and improves performance and results. So quite exciting technology that they're doing it for the whole body now.
okay. Four more quick tweets. Eric has one about a Russian suicide drone attacks school in Zelensky's hometown, which comes right as Ukraine takes back Lyman over the weekend. A key logistic hub and notable loss for the Russians in their new
Yeah,
and
I thought that was a really cool article because it kind of showed if anyone remembers a few years ago there was a kind of a TED talk or a fake TED talk that showed drones that can fly in and just have a little explosive charge on them and they just fly to somebody like a kamikaze situation, and now we see that happening in a very real way. Like more and more, it's happening in the news, and this is one of those more higher profile stories because it pertains to the leader of Ukraine. So
Google Translate. BB found this one in South China Morning Post. Google Translate app no longer available in China, marking U.S. tech giant's latest retreat from world's biggest internet market. The popular app Google Translate has been inaccessible to tens of millions of users across mainland China since Saturday. Users are redirected to a generic search bar, which suggests bookmarking the app's Hong Kong webpage that is also inaccessible in the mainland.
well, there was a story a few years ago actually that showed that Google Translate itself was being used in this lorem ipsum kind of fashion to get messages through the Great Firewall of China. So I guess maybe China has decided to shut that whole thing down now to prevent any sort of communication by exploiting a translation engine to bypass a firewall.
Okay,
The
BB.
official announcement is said it's because the usage is so low. So, and actually, Google Translation is the last last function that the Chinese people could use about the Google service. And right now, none of Google service is available in China anymore. So.
Okay. Speaking of China, BB found one from Reuters that TikTok is partnering with TalkShop Live for U.S. live stream shopping. They're due to enter the partnership with LA-based TalkShop Live to launch its live shopping platform in North America, and that'll save them a bit of time to get the U.S. live stream shopping happening. And last but not least, today from Poppy, the headline says millions of people in the Horn of Africa are food insecure and on the brink of starvation. Yep, that's true. And that's all we got for today. It's Monday.
Mm-hmm. Ben has a room starting right after this. I've already pinned it
Okay.
on top.
Sure.
So please join him if you have
Okay.
time.
Yeah, I need help with this one actually because I don't know the answer at all. I don't even know how to start. It's called How to Avoid Eco Dictatorship, and we need brains on the topic. This is very much a crowdsource the answer job.
And I've got a room where I'll need a crowdsourced answer also. On Thursday in Karma Club, we are discussing cultural toxicity. Me and Heyman and Barbara Annis and whoever else would like to show up because we have friends who have been thrown off the app for expressing an opinion that disagrees with what the prevailing politically correct opinion is. And the way it's done is untraceable, and there's nobody responsible for doing it. And so I need to figure out how I'm going to, or how we are going to approach Clubhouse about not allowing anything like free speech in an app meant for discussion.
Okay. Fair enough. That's a good point.
What day, Francine? What day is your Dr. Francine? What day is your
On
Karma Club? And
Thursday.
what day?
It's Thursday at 11 Pacific, and we had an expert thrown off the stage for expressing an opinion she was about to give research for. And she never got to give the research because somebody just kicked her off the app, not off the stage, not out of the room, but off the entire app. She's been totally deplatformed.
Wow.
And it
Wow.
was ridiculous. But the answer, the question was transgender, um, was basically the industry that's building up around transgender. And it's a big question.
Yeah. For some reason, there's a considerable amount of similar activity in Twitter as well, where there seems to be a heightened sensitivity to negative sentiments around transgenderism, and there's a very low tolerance by the moderators on that.
Yeah, and you know what's happening, Tyler? I'm gonna. I hope there's nobody listening right now, but I'm gonna say it anyway.
Everyone is listening, Dr. Francis.
I
I,
know there.
I'm in Thailand,
There's
where we have a
there,
very long, rich history on this topic. So we can, and it's not a sensitive issue at all here, by the way.
but we have an entire industry that's built up around transgender healthcare, and that industry does not want to be disrupted. And it includes the same people who developed the opioid pills. So
Oh,
it's
wow.
people who take advantage of stuff, and you can't criticize them because if you criticize them, again, you get deplatformed. It's the Pritzkers and the whatever
Okay.
anyway. I'll have the names on Thursday, but they're they are people who have decided that anyone who wants to become transgender should have access to, and I'm not even against this. I'm just wanting to have a debate about it. I think people who are transgender should be allowed to do whatever they want. But but if somebody disagrees, I don't think trying to explain why they disagree, which has to do with business principles and tactics rather than healthcare or medicine or freedom of expression, the wrong thing, whether that person should have been deplatformed. And we'll see on Thursday because better people, Heyman is in this room also. And
Okay. Cool.
I just think people need to be able to discuss.
Yeah. Well, there needs to be tolerance on both sides. Is the crux of the issue.
Totally.
And
Totally.
What does that mean? Like tolerance for oppression, tolerance for
no,
intolerance,
no,
tolerance for accepting the oppression for all this time? What
both
kind of tolerance are we talking about?
both.
Tolerance for the presentation of research that shows that an entire industry has been built up around gender affirming surgery, and a lot of it is being used on young kids whose parents don't know any better. And what if at a certain time later on the child wants to do something else? these these some of these techniques are not reversible.
Yeah, that is an interesting question. I think to what extent can companies reach out to children, because this is something that has to be done at some points earlier rather than later for best results, and it doesn't always give the best results. So I think that's a very fair and open topic, but obviously a very spicy one that might suggest conflicts of interests
I'll
with
add
maybe folks on Clubhouse.
I'll add a little. I mean, Thailand's been doing this much longer than it has been popular in the West. It's been this kind of um, has been
Yes, I had a Thai transgender person on the stage in this conversation who was giving a very important discussion of how she did it.
right.
So
Well, here's the point I want to make: is this is socially, culturally, a relatively it's only relatively become a hot topic in the West. It's been a longer hot topic in Thailand, and why that's so critically important is because of the point I'm about to make, which is Thai parents are incredibly uh, open and tolerant to whatever the child wants to be in terms of gender. Uh, in Thai society is very relatively open and non-judgmental in any kind of way, and relatively. So, and this has been going on for a few decades now. And the reason why that's important is because what the question is, what happens to young folks when they're given tolerance and flexibility and freedom to be whoever they want to be, as they are for the most part in Thailand, and where do they end up 20 years later? And how many of them stay uh, on one side of the gender spectrum or what have you, or do they go somewhere in the middle? Are they fluid? Are they gender fluid, or what happens? So Thailand now has a bit of insight to share on this point that might be useful to the West because, as Dr. Francine was correctly pointing out, the irreversibility issue with decisions by young people is worth contemplating because, for example, there's how many young people, and I understand some people will be upset by my hypothetical analogy here, but I was deeply into heavy metal when I was in my formative teenage years, and when the hormones were really kicking in. And other people were really into punk, and they shaved their head into a mohawk. And there's kids or young teens are very much into forming their identity, and I believe that
Maggie.
at this in 2022, a lot of the identity is coming along with their gender identity, and it's I'm thankful that there weren't medications that would keep me a death metal person, because I eventually uh, my identity evolved and my taste in music evolved and my taste in everything evolved
Oh, and
beyond
could you
that.
have a mohawk today, Tyler?
No, I couldn't actually. Well,
So
there's
you did
medications for that
transition.
too. Yeah, there are medications that could have helped with that. So
Yeah, but
anyway,
hormone treatment is a lot more severe than a mohawk, and I wouldn't care at all if it weren't for the high rate of transgender suicide. But
no,
there's an
my point is,
unbelievable.
if people want to stay a Mohawk or a heavy metal person, as long as they want, that's great. I have friends who are in their 40s who are still punkers and metalheads and whatever. I think it's cool as can be. or skaters, or surfers or whatever, and their identity has stayed the same. But it's general, and I'm not, and I understand gender is a bit different, but I do think there is something in young teens where they go through. There was the hippies, and then the punks, and then the metal. Over the decades, youth consistently seek their identity, and it feels like there's a social movement around identity that now um, that I have to assume, just because of how the age range with which these decisions are being made with regard to forming their identity, it's potentially a something that a lot of folks will, like the previous examples I gave, they might regret making permanent decisions, or decisions that are difficult to reverse.
Well, politically, it is definitely mobilizing the right, especially as some of these conversations express.
You got that right. It might cost the Democrats the election. In fact, from where I'm sitting on the other side of the world.
Hey
Well, and
Tyler, this.
that is the
Oh,
problem. But all I'm wanting is for people to be able to discuss these things openly in a room and present research without being deplatformed. I'm not advocating, that someone take a position one way or the other. I'm very aware of how the right gets mobilized and also how the left gets mobilized. And what's happening is that the research is being buried in the mobilization, and we don't get to discuss the issue.
Well, one of the challenges is on either side is if somebody feels there's people who are leveraging the ability to shut other people down by saying threat of life, threat of this, that, and the other, just off the dialogue. Even if somebody's not directly at them, that can get you deplatformed, flagged, you name it. So I don't know. I always struggle with people who seek tolerance but act intolerant.
I think also to Robert's point a little bit too, and I hope this helps out Dr. Holloway as well. One of the problems I think with the social media platforms in general is that there's a little bit of disconnect on when to really take somebody off who's really a threat versus allowing the dialogue. And I think Clubhouse sort of has a problem. I hope the Clubhouse gods are not listening, but I do think Clubhouse, out of all of them, there's not really a very good feedback mechanism in knowing when somebody when someone's been removed off and for what reason. I trust Twitter a little better than I do Clubhouse, frankly, because when people are posting something alongside with the spaces, you can kind of, a lot of times people have tried to use hashtags. They try to do that with Kamala Harris. When you use hashtags, you really are, it's not no longer a freedom of speech thing, it's sort of harassment. Clubhouse, on the other hand, I think one of the challenges is that there's a tendency to, yeah, you can report somebody, but there is literally like not a feedback, saying, yes, this person's been removed. No, they have not been removed. And I think the problem, I think that is, I think to your point, Dr. Holloway, I think the big problem here, regardless of where people are on an issue, it's the feedback on why people are getting put off.
Oh,
And
you're
I think
totally right. We never have gotten a response to Clubhouse that was anything but canned support, supported clubhouse.com responses. And this person was an invited guest to make a presentation, and she's on the spectrum, so she also has to be guaranteed a safe space. And boy, was this not a safe space.
then I would say there's, the next time that they do a a town hall, every week. That's something that needs to be raised up there for as well, because like I said, they really have not. and I don't have a solid answer on what they should be doing. That's something I'm still pondering a little bit. But I would think that given that social media has been part of our lives for 15 something, close to 15 years, if not near it, the platforms have to be a little bit more responsive, offering some sort of system. And I honestly think there needs to be some coordination among platforms to keep one person from bullying on, say, Facebook coming over to Instagram or coming over to Clubhouse to Twitter Spaces and that type of thing. But that's a whole nother discussion.
Well, Pierre, if I knew the answer, then I would approach Clubhouse in a town hall. But I don't like to present a problem without at least an idea for a solution. So
Yeah, and I
that's what
think
I'm hoping to get out of this room.
if
Because,
I can I was going to say, and I would say, I hear you. I would just say, I'll join in on a room if you. I followed you on here on Clubhouse. I'd happy to sit on that. And I would say, even then, don't get too not to you personally, but I would say the answer may just have to be something that's hashed out because I mean we have to remember that social media has really changed how we communicate globally. And at a certain level, it's media. And sometimes we don't always see all the little issues or all the other things that makes our communication nuanced. So definitely, I look forward to joining your room at least. So and seeing what I can do to help out.
Only
thank
other
you,
thing I can
because
think about. The only other thing I
the,
can think about is if somebody was swept off the stage immediately, they must have some bad blood with somebody beforehand, even if they're new to the platform, because there's not just too many things that are done immediately.
I don't think so. That's what we've been examining. And the room was a physician, Heyman, a PhD, me, and a gender expert, Barbara Annis. We're the ones who run Karma Club. And the expert was a woman who owns a woman's brand company in New York. So
And you guys were discussing transgender surgery.
we were discussing, we weren't discussing the details of transgender surgery. We were discussing the complexities of the transgender lifestyle.
Okay. Were there any transgender
Yes,
uh, people who? What do you mean? Yes. My question is not even finished.
Yeah, then maybe Aaron, you can ask her offline if you want the details.
Yes, of
Okay.
course, Carol. I can discuss offline. All this discussion happened on stage, but yes, I'll discuss
Yeah.
offline. Thank
Uh,
you.
but the
Okay.
answer to your question is yes, there was a transgender woman on stage.
Okay. Ben got his room open. He
yeah,
does.
already started pretty long time ago.
Cool.
And it's 11:11. Oh.